Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and today is the 8th of December, 2024. I missed live streaming yesterday because I had to. Good morning, Alex. And we'll wait. We'll let everybody come in, and then I'll share with everybody kind of at the same time. I hope you had a good weekend so far, and I'm just looking at the sunrise is now coming up. What's cool is that, especially in the wintertime, is that when we have a cloudy sunrise, the clouds are kind of, they're not just a uniform slab of gray. You get this like really pink and purple kind of sunrise, like everything just kind of comes through. And good morning, Joanne. So that's what I'm staring at right now. It's kind of like this fiery, like pink, orange, purple that's kind of coming out underneath. And Sam, hello. Good morning, afternoon. We are, we're back again. I have, I had to cancel a couple days this week, so, because of different things going on with cleaning out the house, actually, quite specifically, because obviously I had the dumpster, and as it turns out, they didn't pick up the dumpster until Friday. I saw them finally come and get it. I was like, I could have worked on it all year. And it's fluffy out again up in New Hampshire, according to Joanne. Fluffy and snowy. That sounds really... That would actually be kind of nice, because you know how it is when all the vegetation kind of turns like that brownish, yellowish color, and it doesn't have the vibrancy of fall, and it's like, so snow actually kind of makes it look... It looks pretty. It looks like a Curry or a Knives painting, It's just very, it's very nice. So, snow sounds like it would be beautiful as long as nobody has anything where to go. I did have a thing happen yesterday, so I had to go down to do the hazardous. Yes, you've been decorating all weekend. Oh, that's cool. The hazardous waste cleanup yesterday wasn't too bad. I've driven past it at times when there has been lines all the way out. There's a highway, so to speak, called Route 12. And I always use highway in quotes, inverted commas, whatever, because when I think of a highway, I always think of something that's got at least 3 lanes on one side and 3 lanes on the other, maybe 2 lanes each side. And a highway like Route 12 is like just 1 lane on either side. So, it is technically a highway, but it's kind of like more like one of the old rural highways. Any case, the county complex is on that road. And so I didn't feel good driving down it. I'm not going to lie. I have, I have the driving kind of limitations. I needed something uplifting to get me out of my funk. Well, that was a good thing to do. Yes. To definitely to decorate. I had to call my mom last night and she asked me whether or not I'd done all my decorating. I didn't want to tell her I threw most of the decoration away, but I just said, yeah, I'm done. But certainly, when you're staying put, it's a nice thing to do. And what was it? So I had, I did, I'm not going to lie, I had nervousness driving there and back until I got into areas that I drive on a regular basis. It seems to me like the familiarity takes the anxiety away. So it was a little touch and go trying to get there and get back. But once I got there, you have to line up, and it's literally like they make this like big circle where you come in on one road. Good morning, Suda. And then you kind of swing around the other side. It took about, I think I got there about 8:30 in the morning. They were supposed to start at 9. Thankfully, I think they started a little early, like around 1:15. Then because then cars just started to move. But you start at one place, and then you're here, and then you're here, and then you're here, and then you got to go up here. And it's like, geez, it seems like the line goes on forever. But they're pretty organized. And so by the time I got up there, it was just like, okay, pop your trunk. We're going to take stuff out of the trunk. I had it in 2 boxes. They just took everything out, closed your trunk, and then you're out, So, so all the stuff that I've had sitting down there, like motor oil, turpentine, certain types of flammable paints, like, that are like spray can kind of stuff where you can't just throw it in the regular garbage, and insecticides, things like that. All of that went in and they took all of it away, and it was done in like 30 seconds. They had a whole team of guys there who were unloading your car, and then that was it. So that went very efficiently. It was just mainly the driving and then the anxiety about being, even though, like I said, 12 is not like a major highway, and it's not like you're even driving that fast, because people think, oh well, it's the speed of the major highway, or it's this or it's that make you anxious. And I'm like, well, yeah, all those things are probably part of what makes me anxious when I have to drive. But I mean, there's places where I'm perfectly, roads I drive all the time where I do 50, 55 miles an hour and I feel fine. I'm not scared to do it. But for some reason what happens, and I was feeling it, it's like my whole left side feels like it just is going to go numb. It's like the weirdest thing. It's not like heart attack numb. It's like literally just everything like doesn't want to move. So like you're steering and it's like you have to force your left hand to do the thing. It's a very odd thing that I contend with. And it's very hard for people to understand because people just say, oh, well, you're very put together and, you have things and you're intelligent and this and that. So therefore these things don't happen to you. You don't have these kinds of sensations. And I'm like, well, yeah, actually I do. Which is why, get it checked, please. Yeah, well, no, I mean, this has been this way for the last 3 years. It's been checked. It's been discussed with doctors. There's nothing, it's not no, because it's not, I'm glad you were safe driving. You understand totally is what Alex says. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not, this was the problem that started in 2019. And this is the problem that doctors cannot solve. And they can't solve it with, there's nothing going on physically. So in other words, there's no other underlying condition that's connected to it. And it doesn't happen all the time. It only happens in these situations of anxiety and, all the therapeutic trying to talk through things, going on certain medications, anti-anxiety meds, literally none of them did anything, like nothing, like not even make me tired. So, they don't work. So I've had to find like my own coping strategies and not all of them are good ones. I'm not going to lie to you, but, I'm just anxious after this week is what Joanne's saying. Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Yeah. It's, yeah, you've experienced, you've been kind of slammed with a lot of loss lately. So, that will definitely, set you off your, well, and it's interesting because it does bring me to the topic that I wanted to bring up today. And, now that, and actually I do have to end on time today because they are coming to service my furnace today downstairs. I've been waiting. I scheduled this back in September and they're finally showing up in December. This is just the date that they had. And I'm like, yeah, as long as it doesn't void the warranty on it, I'll, whenever. But they're going to be here between 8 and 12. Probably my guess from them is they're going to be here more on the side of 12. But if they are coming earlier, they could interrupt. I think I'm afraid to sleep now is what Joanne says. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's, it's... well, okay, the energy of this week, I mean, obviously you've got a certain thing that's going on here, but Neptune has just turned direct. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I know that my dreaming has like ramped up. Like for a while, I was only remembering maybe little snippets of dreams. Now I'm having like massive, full, long narrative dreams, okay, that have been going on. And and that's just started since Neptune went direct the other day. Like the last 2 days have just been night after night of just these crazy, crazy dreams. So we have to have a dream workshop this month. Although Joanne says she's not sleeping at all. So, a family member had a scare earlier this year. It was a TIA. Yeah, well, yeah, I know about TIAs because I know a lot of people in the families. But again, I think when you hear the left side from me, a lot of people are thinking it's heart, but it's not. I promise you, it's not. It has nothing to do with it. Yes, bizarre dreams, Joanne's saying. Oh, I wish. I'm dreamless as usual, but pretty disassociated. Neptune, right? Yes. And Neptune's making a lot of things right now feel like they're not really quite real, I think. Because I get up in the morning and I'm kind of like, am I here? Am I, what, am I doing the thing that I think I'm doing? Like, it's just, yeah, it is kind of weird. But what I wanted to talk about today was the concept of strength, because strength and courage. Because these are two words that, and Joanne says, oh my God, yes, surreal. +1 on dreams, dreamt a friend was pregnant. That's interesting. Pregnancy dreams kind of have their own meaning to them. I mean, there's many possible layers of meaning to a dream like that. So that's interesting. And I also know from the dream workshop that sometimes people will be like, Is this a prophetic dream? Is something going to happen? And I think most of the time they're not, but sometimes they are. You never know. I have occasionally had dreams where, although I find that even prophetic dreams are still symbolic. Like if I dream about a death, I don't dream about like I'll see a person in the dream, and like I'll get this kind of thing like, oh, this person's life has passed, but it's not that person. It's a person. No prophecy. Well, good. Okay. Yeah, but nonetheless, the idea that a certain person is pregnant is like, you know, yeah, it's like what does the whole idea of pregnancy convey, you know, with regard to this person? And that would be an association that you would have with that person, perhaps, you know, whatever it is you associate them with, you know, what new beginning is there trying to start that connects with whatever you associate with this person, right? That'd be my first way of thinking about it. But the dream workshops are great because everybody jumps in and other people come up with stuff I've never thought of. Could be the birth of a venture, of an idea, etc. Well, exactly. That's probably more what it might be. And the question would be, what are the associations there, right? But the thing I was going to talk about today was strength, okay? So we have the card of strength. Now, the reason I want to talk about strength and courage is because we all have an idea about what it is, and it tends to be a very masculine idea of strength, okay? Now, I pulled out another lion card, okay? Now, mind you, this is not the strength card. This is not the equivalent card, just to be clear. But it's the conditioning card. And many of you, we've gotten it in readings here on the live stream. Those of you who have worked with me, this card has come up. Occasionally, you will hear me say to you, you are a lion and not a sheep, right? And so we associate the lion with strength, with bravery, right? Sheep we associate with, sheep are very placid. They're nice. You know, if you ever walk through a field of sheep, like somewhere, you know, they just walk around and they're just like, you know, they just sit there and they just kind of look at you and then they just kind of slowly just move out of the way as you go through. You know, they don't stand around. They'll just kind of move, and you know, and they crap everywhere, of course, like a lot of them. So you gotta watch out. And then they're hilarious when they make the their bleeding sounds or their buying sounds. Sometimes they're just very, very funny to hear. But especially the rams sometimes. I remember when I was in Ireland, I actually heard this one ram that just kept like, I couldn't even imitate the vocalization, but I know Michael Keneally was like, he was giving me my little tour guide. He was trying to explain to me about, and I couldn't stop laughing because of this ram was just making this noise. But anyway, so the idea is that you think of a sheep as being in a flock. And so that's when we think of herd mentality, right? Just kind of following along with the crowd. And the lion is going along like he's a sheep, but the lion actually has something that is, has some kind of forthright thing where it has a certain strength or majesty, or there's the implication there of the lion as being not only the predator, but kind of the leader, like the strong one. Whereas the sheep are considered to be kind of docile and need to be protected. We can think about all the associations of sheep with biblical references, you know, the Lamb of God and things like that. The idea lamb as the sacrificial victim, or lamb as the one who is, you know, not the shepherd who has to look after the flock, right? Whereas the lion can, in theory, stand on its own. Okay, so this is actually the devil card in this deck. So it's saying you don't want to be attached to kind of this herd mentality about who you are and what you need to be. You are your own authentic person. So there's the lion in that sense. And lions, yeah, they tend to be, we think about the star Regulus, which is actually, it's in the constellation of Leo. And so there's something very regal about lions, okay? There's something about that conveys royalty when we think about that kind of energy. And of course, this card is the card that represents Leo energy. But now, okay, now in some versions of this card, I have the Mythic Tarot. I didn't pull this one down today. But the Mythic Tarot shows this as Heracles overcoming the Nemean lion, okay, where that's one of his labors, is to go up and, you know, to conquer and to bring back this lion. I think to bring it back alive, too. But the idea is, and if you think about Heracles' labors, all of them are about, there's some kind of a thing. There's a hydra, there's a lion, there are these cattle that are, you know, they're hard, these cannibalistic horses. There's all these kinds of weird things that he has to, and if you actually look at the symbolism of each one of those, that's another class in and of itself, is the 12 labors of Heracles, and what each of the things he's facing represents. And it's actually in the midst of the Heracles myth that we see the Chiron wound as well. Because it's Heracles when he's drinking wine with Chiron and the other centaurs that's when Chiron gets his fatal wound that he can't die from. So it's Heracles tends to represent a kind of force that is, when we think of it as superhuman strength. I had a question on that involves Medusa. I need to text you about that. Yeah, definitely text me about it. Yeah, you mentioned that a while back, so yeah, you can reach out to me about that for sure. So I guess the idea is when we think of Herculean strength, right? Hercules being, of course, the Roman name for Heracles. It's very close. Heracles actually, and interestingly, Heracles actually means the glory of Hera. Okay, that's literally what it means. Herakleos, the glory of Hera. And and when we think about it, Hera is the queen of the gods, right? She's the one who, even though she is the one who submits to Zeus as his wife, she's not. I would hardly call her a passive force. Technically speaking, her and her brother are kind of equals in terms of probably in terms of the powers that they have. And Joanne says she just watched a documentary on it. Oh, okay. But Heracles. We tend to think of that as being unconsciously, that is like almost the archetypal model for strength. And strength in this case is somebody who has the brute force to overcome some terrifying monster. Okay, we also see this in the motif of dragon slayers. And I talked about this, I believe I talked about this when I talked about the mother complex on the Catonia live stream. Hera is kind of a biatch. Yeah. Well, there was an article that I read by, I think it was by Maggie Kilgore, called Juno and the Wrath of Satan. And Kilgore, she makes this argument that Juno, or Hera, is actually kind of a satanic, like what we would think of as a satanic figure, in the sense that she is there to test and she's there to provoke. So it's interesting. And actually Heracles, she actually hates him. She wanted to kill him as a child. Like you talk about the serpents. The serpents, he was an infant. The serpents ended up in his crib, and he takes both of them and he crushes them with his hands. Now you just think about the symbolism of that. Of this masculine figure, this illegitimate child of Zeus, who's able to crush things with these powerful forces that can kill with his hands, right? But so we tend to think of that as being a representation of strength. But the thing is, Hera, he eventually is married to Megaera, and they have this family. But then Hera drives him mad. And so she does have this power over him. And then he ends up murdering his family. That's why he ends up having to do these labors as kind of a penance for what he had, for what he did. And so that's, to me, that's okay. That is Hera as the feminine force, the man who thinks that his strength is what makes him superior. The strength is what makes him. That's what makes you a manly man, right? That is that brute strength without completely out of balance with the feminine leads to madness. And you see that over and over, even in the Greek dramas, okay? And it's not just with Heracles, it's with other figures like Ajax as well. That's what specifically comes to my mind. But you will see these great heroes who are driven to madness. And it's because if we think about quote unquote madness, what is that? It probably in that sense, I mean, we don't want to get too literal and talk about aspects of necessarily, I mean, people may think about it in terms of aspects of mental illness in a modern sense, but, and there may be an element of that in what the Greeks conceived of as these daemonic forces of the psyche that, though they didn't really think about it as the psyche, they thought about it as these forces that just acted on you, that were in nature, right? And that these forces that could affect your psychology were part of it. So he has this madness that's inflicted on him. But this is, again, that's why I think Hera is one of the chief ones who does this, because she is the one to say, you're not giving the feminine its due. Okay. So now let's go back to the strength card that we have in the tarot deck. Okay. Let's take we're doing it the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, obviously. And we've got the strength card here. So what is this? This is not Heracles overcoming the lion. Who's overcoming the lion here? We have a woman. Okay. We have a woman. She's dressed in white. She's wearing kind of flowers around her waist, and she's wearing a crown of flowers. And she has a lemniscate over her head, okay, which is also known as the infinity sign. Certainly in mathematics, that's what it's known as. Your sideways 8, whatever we want to think about, want to call this. I found out the formal name for it was a lemniscate, and I was just like, oh, I didn't know that for a long time. And I was like, oh, that's what that is. Okay, so, and you also see it on the magician card. So, okay, so there's a lot that's implied here about what strength and courage actually is. And I think it's something that a lot of us need to consider as we're going through our individual things and if we're told to be courageous. Now, courageous can mean, quote unquote, facing your demons, okay? Saying, okay, it's better not to hide from something, but rather than to confront it. But is it always good to directly confront something? That's always the thing about strength. That's where we get into these, the way the gods play in warfare in Greek mythology, for instance, is you have some that are very direct in terms of their influence. You know, we're going to go in and Suda says, nope. And then other times it's a matter of like the Odysseus's of these things. I just did a podcast for Catonia patrons on the Odyssey and the Dark Feminine, and wow, Wayne just talked about courage, the 7 sacred laws. Okay, yeah, so it's a topic that came up. It was the one that came up in my head this morning, and the thing about it is that what we're seeing here is almost like a feminine courage. This woman is shutting the jaws of the lion. That's what she's doing here. The lion has its jaws open, like it's ready to attack. And strength is about shutting the lion's jaw, right? What sign planet rules the strength card? It's ruled by the sun, and it is Leo energy. Typically, when I see this card, I always think of it as being dealing with like the month of August, roughly. I mean, that's because it's like August to Leo is late July to mid-August, right? So this is, So strength is, that's Leo energy. It's ruled by the sun. So we think of that as a very active, masculine kind of energy. 5th house. Oh, the sideways 8. Yeah, the sideways 8 is the Leminskit, yeah. And interesting, I'm in the solar Leo protection year. Just caught that. Yes, it's, exactly. Oh, you're saying sideways 8 in terms of the 8th month. Got it. Okay. That's, well, you could look at it that way, potentially. But the thing is, with this card, what does it imply? The strength here is not the strength of a man tearing a lion apart. It's the strength of the woman who's shutting the jaws of the lion. Okay, so this has a lot to do, and when you use this card in readings, and as many of you who do read know, this is about the appropriateness of force. Okay, what is the appropriateness of force? If the lion is roaring, okay, well, first of all, a lion with an open jaws could be ready to eat you, right? But it could also just be, we tend to think of it as lion as almost roaring with anger, like in the 10 of Swords card that we have in the Osho Zen deck. It's the roaring lion. It's like you have the docile, they use the camel as the docile one, right? And then the lion roars like, I'm angry, listen to my voice. I'm going to tell all of you what I think of you, kind of energy. And interestingly, in Mars retrograde, that is a kind of thing that we have to watch out for, right? Because when we have the strength and courage to do something, oftentimes it does mean doing something that we don't naturally want to do. Sometimes it does. So motivation is like a factor number 1. When we have the strength to do something, we have to be motivated to do it. That's number 1. But with motivation often comes an intensity of energy, and that can lead to an impatience. Because a lot of times if we're doing something like that, it's because we, quote unquote, want to get it over with. You know, we feel that way about a lot of change. Let's just get it over with. And Alex is saying, it can be more like posturing than true action. Or it's more like, it's not an action we want to take. It's more like duty bound. Like, okay, I just have to just suck it up and do this. It's like I have to eat my vegetables even though I hate them, right? So impatient. Yeah, but that's the way we are, because when we get that burst of intense energy, what's the appropriateness of that energy? How do we make use of that energy without acting prematurely, okay? Or potentially, you know how it is if you're doing something that's very, very delicate. Think about somebody who works on a bomb squad, right? They're trying to defuse a bomb. They can't just go in and do so. They have to be very, very careful, right? You have to be very cautious, because otherwise the thing's going to blow up in your face, okay? And that's the thing. You have to, it's that kind of a thing. Sometimes there's situations where we know that there's like a fuse lit. Okay, how do we put the fuse out? How do we keep this thing from, how do we safely detonate this thing, right? Joanne has no energy, no motivation, and no patience. Yeah, well, very typically Taurian, because frequently I find myself in the same boat. And I think this topic maybe came to my mind because I wake up and I'm thinking like, okay, I would like to have a day to just rest, but I have this person coming back and I have videos to make and I have this to do and I have a podcast to edit and I have blah, 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 blah. I should have edited my podcast last night, but I didn't. So, there's all this stuff that has to be done, right? And if we, because not doing it may have other consequences, right? But I thought about this idea of strength. Sometimes it's literally the strength not to do something. Okay, it's the strength it's when somebody, I was somewhere the other day, and I don't want to say too much because I don't want to be too public about these interactions, but I was somewhere the other day that I had to be, and I was getting ready to teach a class, and there was the person I was talking to had somebody else in the shop, another woman in the shop. And this woman had kind of seated herself in the shop, and she was, they were having lunch or whatever. And I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to go off and do my thing. And she asked what I was doing. She asked if I was like a yoga teacher or something like that. And I said, no. I said that I'm teaching intuitive development. And she goes, intuitive development? Just like that. And I just went, yeah. And I turned around and I started talking to my friend. I just blew her off after that because, with the Mars retrograde energy, I knew I had no patience, because literally I wanted to say like, yeah, what's your issue? I just kind of wanted to say that, but I was just like, no, just shut your mouth. And I just talked to my friend about what I needed to talk about, and then I was like, well, I have to go on and do my thing, and then I happened to see this person, my friend, the next day. And they were saying, it was funny because my kind of perception of the situation is kind of what it was. Oh yeah, I would have had to run away. That's what Alex is saying. Yeah, but that's frequently that's just an example of a kind of situation that we find ourselves in, where somebody says or does something that's meant to be kind of a criticism or a passive aggressive kind of judgy kind of a thing, and and again, if you're with this Mars retrograde energy, there's oftentimes a strong feeling of like, yeah, you want to fight about it, next time say you're an astronaut or something. Yeah. Just what Joanne's saying. Well, it's, it's funny. It was just, honestly, really the reality is I know there's always going to be people who say that like, oh, I can't believe you do that. Yeah, well, then don't do it. My feeling is I don't really care what your opinion of it is. There's a lot of people who will say that to me because I'm an academic. They'll be like, oh, well, how can you be interested in all this other kinds of, stuff? And I'm like, well, because I know enough as an academic to know that, well, why ask to judge, right, is what Suda's saying, right? It's like you kind of have this thing where it's like I've learned enough in academia to know that I don't know everything, and that there is a bigger picture, and that bigger picture is not going to seen through analysis, writing papers, and dissection. Okay, all those things can lead to interesting discussions and understandings of life and the currents and so forth, and can help us maybe intellectualize the big picture. But to really experience the big picture, you have to experience it, not intellectualize it. And I know there's a lot of people who just literally, they just don't get that. They don't get it at all. They think the mind is everything. And, so those people think the mind is everything. Them being critical because they say, well, I can't believe you're trying to do something outside the mind. Well, believe it. And then when something happens to you one day and you're going to be like, well, wait, this doesn't fit into my worldview. And I'll be like, well, I don't know. Maybe you need to alter your worldview a little bit, And Joanne's saying, I'm so over people. Yeah, but the fundamental thing is I don't care. It's not like I went home and nursed a grudge about it. It was just like, yeah, I can see your personality. I can already tell you what your narrative is and how you feel about things. And I got some validation of that kind of the next day. The shift which I'm still trying to make is very freeing. It is a very freeing shift. Yes, that's a good point, Suda. It is something that is very freeing because when you get to a point where you no longer, it's not like everything isn't a battle. And I think that's where we're getting down to with the strength card. Everything does not have to be a battle. You know, you hear the expression, choose your battles. Everything doesn't have to be a battle. You know, you're going to go through life and some people are going to be very complimentary of you and what you do and other people are not. And that's just what it is. But you made a choice not to fight or make it be more than just that person's issue. Yes, right, exactly. Well, right, there's a choice there. There's a choice to not fight. And sometimes that's the choice you make. You close the lion's jaw instead of going crazy. Now, back to the kind of sideways 8. That's the Leminskit. Now, the Leminskit is, as I said, the infinity sign. And so, first of all, that says something about time, right? It says something about the nature of time. We always tend to, if we talk about impatience, right? We're always tending to act as though, you know, something has to happen in a certain frame of time or a short frame of time or within this period of time. And the Leminskit says, you know, there really is no such thing as time. Okay, time is kind of a thing. There's just a flow. And the Leminskit, in a way, is kind of, there's something a bit Taoist about it because it's in a loop that's kind of endless. We're kind of moving through this loop, and sometimes we're over here, and sometimes we're over here. And we can talk about that with a lot of things. We can talk about that with our emotions. We can talk about it with patterns of just milestones and things that happen to us. We just flow through it. And I think, as I had mentioned a long time ago, when I had that Victorian poetry class with Dr. Dell, who had his line on the board between the real and the ideal. And he had talked about it with respect to poetry. But he had said that a lot of times, if he was talking about the way the different poets, it's funny, we're talking about Neptunian energy, right? Or Saturn, or Neptune, or Saturn in Pisces. It's the idea of how much do you want to be in the world of the ideal, you know, where we imagine what is, you know, kind of feet off the ground, and how much do you need to be rooted in the real? And a lot of times, you know, because you don't want to give up the ideal, that's part of what it means to be human, but how rooted are you in the real? And a lot of people seem to feel like, well, I'm going to spend a little time over here and a little time over here. And he always felt like, Dr. Dell would be like, that's a cop-out. You can't do it that way. And what he had pointed out by the end of the class was he drew along that continuum, he drew a Leminskit. He said, that's actually the way. You're continually flowing between the two. The ideal feeds the real, and vice versa. They flows between. And so being in the flow means you always act from a position of strength. You always act from your center. You always do the right thing. Because, you know, and the right thing, there's no one standard definition of the right thing in a lot of cases. I mean, you know, people could have pointed to some extreme examples, right? They'd be like, well, you know, if you have the choice to murder somebody or not murder somebody, then don't murder them. Well, yeah, probably most of the time that's probably true. And I only say most of the time because it's like if somebody's there trying to, like, say, murder your child or something, then maybe you might feel differently about the situation. But again, we get very much into these ethical dilemmas, and that's something that modern religion, that is one of the things of modern religion that we don't see in ancient religion. While there are certainly rules and taboos and things, I wish this was more what I can embody rather than weighing scales. Is what? Alex, yeah, because you're a Libra, right? But but finding balance. But I think what it's saying is the key to finding balance is allowing yourself to do that flow rather than feeling one thing and saying, no, now I have to balance it with this thing. That it's more about just flowing into what's going on. And the way to do that is just to stay in the moment, which, you know, everybody talks about. It's like, yeah, just so easy, just stay in the moment. We all have a hard time staying in the moment. Yes, sometimes that justice thing and morality catches you. Yes, because that's the thing, and that's why, like in the West, there's often a lack of understanding of ancient religion. I've done articles on this, and not done, but with students, I've had them read articles on this subject, and it's kind of this idea that we got 3 7s today. This is interesting. I could have used this reminder yesterday, Suda Seslo. But that's it. But see, when we think about somebody as being judgy, okay, and we all have our judgments, okay? I mean, that's just, to be human is to judge. You have to when you have to make decisions about things, you have to make a judgment as to the risks of something or whether or not the risks are worth it. So, you know what I mean? It's not that we don't have any judgment, but we tend to make this judgment a big cosmic thing. there's a divine judge. There's, remember if you would grow up in Catholic school where they're like, oh, you have an angel and a devil on your shoulder, and each one's trying to make you, and you have to choose the right thing. The right thing apparently being according to what dogma says is the right thing. That very dogmatic way of looking at things, that very rule-bound ways of looking at things. A lot of times people think strength is to stick to those rules, but those rules don't always apply to human life. It doesn't flow. It stops the flow of life because it's too rigid. It says that, there's no, it's like Alan Watts had said about the judge who's very strict about the rules versus one who shows some equanimity. Yes, this is the rule, and yes, you violated it, but here's all the other circumstances around it, so I'm going to modify whatever my sentence is because I'm recognizing that perhaps this is a mitigating factor, right? Like something like that. And also just the fact, back to what I had said about the Carol Gilligan's Amy and Jake story, where, that was the Heinz's dilemma. Should Heinz steal the medicine? This is a psychological dilemma, if you don't remember this. Should Heinz steal the medicine? If his wife has got cancer, he can't afford the medicine. Should he steal it or let his wife die? Like, those are the choices, black and white, two choices. And Jake is like, well, just what I said about equanimity, right? Well, if he did, maybe a judge would be lenient, blah, blah. And Amy says, why are those the choices? So to kind of be in that mindset is to get outside the idea. That's why we need to move into the ideal, because we need to be able to expand our way of looking at things, saying, you know what, maybe it's more than just black and white. Maybe it's more than two choices here. Well, the amount of conditioning you're helping me shed right now, thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Well, yeah, but that's the thing. And it takes a while. And that's so patience is often part of it too. You just have to recognize that, like when you get angry at things or when you start going, what the F is this person doing? Like, we do it. It's how we're conditioned, Agreed. Been in this place the last few days also. Yeah, and with Mars retrograde especially, and Neptune going to, I feel like they both come into play here because they're making us go back and look at the appropriateness of aggressive behavior or the appropriateness of certain things, or where our resentment, impatience, irritability comes in. And it's not saying that, we're going to be free of that for our entire lives because, it's just part of being human, right? We're all going to feel those things at different times. But being able to step back and go, okay, yeah, you kind of feel your way through it, but then you let it go, yes, in the moment, this person is irritating me, but you know what? I'm just going to be like, whatever, move on. You have to decide when it's worth fighting with somebody and when it's worth, because sometimes you do have to fight with people. I'm not going to say that that's never appropriate action. Sometimes there are times when you need to tell somebody where to go soak. It's not always the wrong thing to do, but especially if it has the potential to either harm you or harm somebody close to you. If you're responsible for a child, for instance, and somebody's making a decision that is going to harm your child, then you need to step up and say something, right? You need to, or whatever. The only thing too, though, is that a lot of times when we see that for other people, we have to be careful not to. Sometimes we have to let other people fight their own battles too. That's another thing too, because when we see something. That's a problem I have, because when I have a friend, and I'm very empathetic, and if I see a friend of mine is hurting and I know that somebody's hurt them, my inclination is to want to black out on that person, but I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, I have to let them deal with it because they're in the situation and they know everything about it. So sometimes I have to pull my judgment back, even though I completely sympathize with the friend. I feel like, okay, but I'm also not in it. And, in a certain sense, it might not even be my business. It's just kind of like I have to, but because I care about the friend, it's like I want to get involved, is it a private fight or can anybody get in on it, But then I'm like, okay, you got to remember that this is for them to decide how they want to manage it. Because you've seen situations with people where they will be like, they'll be so angry and they'll be so upset and then they're like that, like for example, if it's a relationship, that's it, I'm leaving, hey, this is done. And you're like, you're right, that guy's a jerk, It's so hard. Yeah, no, it is hard, Suda. It really can be hard. And I was like, that guy's a real jerk, and you should really do that. And then the next day they're like, no, never mind, we made up. And you know what I mean? So then you look like the jerk because you're like telling this person, so now you look like the bad guy, So it's kind of. So that's why I think even like in therapy, there's this idea that you listen without judgment, okay? but also not trying to make the decision for the person. You know, that's sometimes part of it too. Not in my daughter's ex case. I want to smoke. Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying, Joanne. In places, you have there's some people there you can legitimately say, okay, we all have people who it's legitimately like, no, you actively were seeking to do harm, in which case, you know, yeah. So, all right, so let's get on with our reading, because we've only got like 4 minutes left today. Yeah, we're starting with our Seven of Swords, right? Politics card. So this can be the ways in which we, well, interestingly, Seven of Swords can be a card of negotiation, but there's also an element of not wanting to deceive ourselves, okay? I always feel like when this card shows up, it's more about self-sabotage than other people trying to sabotage us. I mean, unless you're specifically asking about is somebody trying to sabotage me? Typically, this has to do with the ways in which we sabotage ourselves. And the inner feeling of which we are not aware is the projections card, okay? I know the Seven of Cups. So Seven of Cups is, the boundary between what's real and what's not real, but also the way in which a lot of times, okay, so that actually gets to a different element of it. Sometimes the judgments that we make in the environment may be something that's more about a judgment we're making about ourselves, unconsciously. About whether or not I'm a good person, whether or not I'm following the rules, whether or not I'm doing the thing. And when we see somebody else not doing it, we go, oh, look, they're not doing it, you know? And so it becomes a projection of something that actually kind of bothers us, right? Darn these 7 cards. I got 7 of Wands in my draw. Yeah, well, then you rounded it out, because the only other card I got was the 7 of Pentacles. So now we have all the 7s here, right? So yeah, so we have to make it. So I think the reason that we do that, part of this act of strength, is that we withdraw those projections. That way we're not really deceived, as the 7 of Swords points out. We don't manipulate, we don't allow people to manipulate us, right? It's that kind of a thing. The external feeling of which we are aware is the Creator card. This is the King of Wands, okay? And so, yeah, that there is creative energy here. And then actually that's interesting, because that almost implies that one of the ways in which we use those projections and those narratives and stories is, rather than to play them out unconsciously in projections with others, is to find a way to use that energy creatively. Back to that. And she says, boom, chakalaka here. Yeah. To find a way to use that energy creatively, and thus act from a place of maturity, right? The Ace of Pentacles again. Seems like we're getting this one a lot. So yeah, we're acting from that place where we, so right now, okay, so the projections is showing up in the unconscious place. So I think what it's saying is that when we're dealing with strength, sometimes when we shoot from the hip, we may be projecting anger outwards to a place where it's just kind of like, okay, wait a minute, let's step back here and kind of figure out what, especially if you think it's going to be a reaction that's going to be a fight reaction. It's kind of like, sometimes we have to kind of figure out, is it okay, or is a person's judgment on me, or is their projection onto me something that I'm going to fight with them about? A lot of times people project all over the place, because sometimes it's too painful to deal with what's inside. So they take it out on us, or they say, oh, it's you, that you are the one. Now, of course, there's the whole narcissistic disorder, and that's a whole separate thing, but and gaslighting and stuff like that. But also, you kind of have to look at it as sometimes people, okay, it's like the Zen story, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Our outcome is the Patience card. Okay, thanks. Oh, you're welcome. It's the Patience card. Yeah, we have to be patient with situations. We have to be patient with ourselves, too. Because a lot of times, I think our projections are our frustrations of not being where we want to be, or not doing the thing we want to do, or not having things the way that we want them. But then we have to kind of say, okay, let's not think about what I want, or people who flip the narrative off them onto you. Well, exactly. That's certainly the projection right there. So this is about stepping back and saying, okay, it's like, okay, I do have to go because it's 7:45, but the quick Zen story I was going to tell you, which I've told you before, but it kind of is a reminder. It's the Zen master who, it could be better, why are we here instead? Or better said that way. Maybe, yeah, it's, well, the story I was going to mention was that there's a Zen master who, somebody accuses him of sexually assaulting a girl, and she has a baby, and they say, oh, it was you're the father. And the guy's not the father, but he just says, is that so? And so they tell him he has to take care of the baby. So he takes the baby and, he raises it, he plays with the child, whatever. And then a few years later, they come back and they say, we made a mistake. She admitted that that wasn't the case. She kind of had done something on the side her parents didn't want her to do. So we apologized, and he goes, is that so? So he gives the child back. And the idea that in both cases, he's accused of something he didn't do, but his attitude is just like, oh, is that so? Now, mind you, that's kind of an extreme case, right? If somebody was accused of that, obviously, and they didn't do it, in our kind of modern societal thinking, no, that's not okay. But nonetheless, the idea is just that somebody has a judgment about you. You know what it is about you? And, the answer is that so? That's frequently my answer to people. Is that so? Okay. I'm glad you know me better than I know myself, right? But I don't know. When people are projecting onto you, but we also the strength is also saying, is there a possibility here that I'm projecting onto them? And so we kind of pull back. So anyway, thanks today for Morning's Coffee has helped me a bunch. Oh, fantastic. It's always good to start your day by being helpful to people. And so you guys will hear more from me. We definitely have the little get together next week, which is going to be fun. Looking forward to seeing all you guys. I want to have an email for Sam too that I'm going to do. She sent me one. Thank you for your email. I'm going to send you one back. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. And it's so good to see you guys today again after a day off. And I will be back tomorrow. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. Thanks. Have a great day too.